This is the first ever Parisi podcast. I'm going to be the host today. I'm Steve Leo. I am joined today with Casey Lee. We'll get to that in a minute. Just want to give you guys a couple updates how this is going to work. So if you're on the Zoom call, just keep yourself muted. Feel free to put questions up in the chat anytime you want. We'll try to get to them at some point throughout the call. If we can't, we'll figure out another way to get to you. This will be posted eventually as well. Our wonderful good friend that works for Parisi's, Carol, will get everything posted up, and you guys will be able to download it in due time. This is our first round, so bear with us if we hit a few bumps in the road. But Casey and I are kind of veterans doing podcasts. He has his own on the side. I host another podcast as well. So we've done this before. We want to try to bring you guys a little bit of content in more of a talking format, not just a, let somebody just talk and give, say, a webinar. We want to really just discuss training and how it can really affect kids, and that's what we do for a living, and myself and Casey. So hopefully this is a lot of fun. We want to keep it loose. This isn't a real strict presentation, right? We want to have a little bit of fun here, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to chime in. All right, Mr. Casey Lee, he is a I don't know what you are. You get a lot of titles, so we'll start with your program director up in Williston, Vermont. Been training for a decade now, at least, right?
I'm going on 12 years of coaching actual people, like actually being a person that trains other people.
All right. You got your training wheels off. Proud of you. There you go.
I feel like my hairline is starting to reflect how long I've been coaching too.
What happens?
Yeah.
Wait till your back starts hurting. And then obviously, Casey was a master coach for a few years through the Parisi network. He and I got to work together for a while, and it was definitely a lot of fun. And we created a good friendship outside the Parisi nation. Also, too, though, Casey's heavily involved with our corporate team. He's hosting a mentorship program right now to Parisi's, and also has definitely been involved in a lot of projects and has spoken at our summits. So definitely one of the leaders, not only in Parisi's, but in our industry. So I gave him a quick, brief intro, but I'm gonna let Mr. Casey Lee do the full intro, and don't be shy.
Steve Leo, appreciate the intro. Always fun to be considered for anything Parisi does, let alone the first of anything that they do. Like you said, hopefully we don't suck too much on this pod. But my name is Casey Lee. I'm the director of fitness and performance up in Vermont for a health club chain called The Edge. I say chain, there's 5 locations. It's locally owned though, which I think that we're kind of a gem in the commercial gym industry. I'll phrase it like that. I think a lot of people who work at commercial gyms think it's like a coffin and you're burying your career. And I have nothing but glowing things to say about working in a commercial gym and all the fun things that it can bring. Yes, there's headaches, but there's headaches in every gym, whether it's a boutique, whether it's commercial, whether it's health in a hospital, whatever it might be. We have Parisi Speed School. I believe we're number 66. We're a franchise. We just renewed contract number 3. So if we're judging gyms based on how many leases they signed, we're going on year 11 with Parisi and on our 3rd agreement with Parisi. So we've made it. We have 3 performance coaches plus myself on top of 19 personal trainers for the health club. We have 3 registered dietitians on staff. We also have full physical therapy in-house, and we have a mental skills coach as well. So the cliche one-stop shop gets thrown around a lot, but we've really tried to emulate a vision, a very distinct vision that we've all had of making ourselves kind of the go-to place in Northern Vermont for athletic performance. But at the same time, every kid that plays a sport has a parent, and they train with us as well too. So moms and dads don't go in season, soccer players do. So it's helped keep our business around for 11 plus years, and it's been a lot of fun since.
No, that's awesome. I know your club is one of the best I've ever been to. I've been to a couple times, and you guys rock it up there. And in Vermont, which is the population up there is not tremendous, right? What is the You're in Burlington, so how many people even live in that area? 5, 6?
I couldn't even tell you, man. I just know that in Chittenden County, the county that I'm in, is got the most stuff going on. And as soon as you get outside Chittenden County, it gets desolate, and stoplights become few and far between.
Well, I think one of the things people could take away, number one, is you've made it work maybe in a market that's probably not as economically affluent, right? As some of the places,
yeah,
I'm in New Jersey, which is different. So I think one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is obviously, listen, we're still living COVID. I don't think anybody back in March and April, you and I did a podcast together. I think it was May or April, I can't remember. And we were talking about, hey, probably by the end of the summer, this thing will probably be over with. Well, we're middle of September, and this is the new norm, right? That's the crazy term out there. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and I know you've been open a little bit longer. New Jersey basically has just gotten opened up probably in the last, let's say, 45 days. Some clubs I know just opened a few weeks ago. And, it's a little bit of a struggle. Everyone's trying to get some people back. I think some people are nervous, which is obviously, understandable. But, how have you dealt with people, number one, coming back indoors? I think the indoors thing is really what's maybe bugging people or making people nervous. So how have you dealt with that? And, going from when you first opened compared to today, because I think you've been open 2 or 3 months, kind of tell us, what has been going on and just give us some feedback on, I know things have been going well, but I'm sure in the beginning it was a little bumpy.
Yeah. So for us, Vermont gave the green light to gyms on June 1st. Our club took an extra week just to make sure everything was, I'll say, in alignment to what we wanted to be when we reopened. So we opened on June 8th, and then our Parisi Speed School opened on June 15th. For group stuff. We did open initially for that first week with one-on-one coaching, but we wanted to give everyone kind of a week to come in and see the place, see the space. And then I'm going to throw a huge asterisk on what we did, because we're part of a 35,000 square foot indoor turf field. So high ceilings, outdoor intake fans, exhaust fans. Like, we had the ideal setup, I think, to be socially distant. So our Parisi basically was attached to this, or is attached to this. So we put the curtain up that we had, a retractable curtain, put it all the way up, and reconstructed the entire gym fitness center in about 15,000 square feet. And then we have another 10,000 square feet that's just an open turf field. Plus we have another 10-ish, it's probably a little less than 10. That's going to be kind of our Group X area. And then our Parisi Speed School, which is about 4,700 square feet of open space. So everything is extremely open, and we designed it so that it looked different than what we had before, which was a smaller aerobic studio, small fitness center, kind of like you would see in a normal commercial gym. So I put a big asterisk on that because we had this monstrosity of an indoor field house that definitely made our reopening noticeably different for our members, but also noticeably different for the community. So when we reopened, we did not hit the ground running. By no means did we hit the ground running. I think the industry norm right now is like 40% of your membership base is you're killing it. We are about, I think we're in like the high 20s, and our Parisi, we opened with about 40% of our membership base coming back. So right now we're at about 47% of our active membership base. So, I think there's a lot of different things. One, yes, people maybe not wanting to be inside, but two, all of everything else that a kid does, a student athlete does, did the same thing. So do the same thing as us. They weren't able to practice. All these travel soccer teams, travel lacrosse teams, they weren't able to go because state regulations. And then once they could, these normal timelines that we had of, okay, the club soccer's off for the month of August and club lacrosse isn't going to run this fall. Everyone's doing the same thing we're having to do and figuring out how to make it all work. So we actually started better than we currently are. I have no problem saying that, because everything has just been pushed back. Now, like you're seeing with pro sports, basketball, football, hockey, soccer, golf, everything's running at the same time. That's what's happening right now with AAU basketball, travel lacrosse, the school sports to the best of their abilities. Everything's running at the same time. So it's almost more of a, I also say it's more of a shit show now than it was when we reopened and everything was being phased in. So it's been a little different for us now that it's September and kids are back in school in Vermont on this weird hybrid schedule. But the reopening, I think, was smooth. It was a lot easier for us to go from virtual to reopening than it was from closed to virtual. And I'm very thankful for that, because if I never have to coach a kid in Zoom ever again, I will be the happiest trainer ever.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've seen, obviously I teach, I'm at a private school, and we open full time. We're one of the few schools, I think only like 70 some schools in the state of New Jersey are actually back in full time. Obviously there's a lot of Zoom going on. So I have my daughter's at the school with me. She's in full time. My other daughter's at our public school only in 2 days a week. And, I've been talking to a lot of those parents and trying to get an understanding of like what you're saying, because everything got pushed back. You saw a lot of these club sports get pushed, like you said. I mean, I know some kids just finished up some of their club seasons because they got it going in July. What do you think, and I'll kind of answer myself as I say this, but what do you think is going to be the norm moving forward? Because in New Jersey, they're going forward with high school sports. Everything got pushed back about a month, but not too bad. But one of the things I've noticed with some of the parents and kids that I've seen is, and it's kind of sad, but the kids that are more, I don't want to say dedicated, but kids are really passionate or into their sport. They take it seriously. They want to play varsity and club and maybe play at the collegiate level. I see more of them wanting and getting back into whether it be training or lessons or whatever. I'm seeing the more recreational athlete, which I have that. My older daughter is probably more of a competitive athlete. My younger daughter is more of a recreational athlete. I'm seeing the recreational athletes and the parents maybe not caring, but they're kind of like, well, I don't know if I want to do anything yet. And there might be some nerves there again because of COVID. So, have you seen it going that way as a divide, or it's just been kind of, just crazy across the board?
It's kind of across the board a little bit here in Vermont, whereas high school sports this year had 0 cuts. I've never, in 10 years working with high school sports, I've never seen that. The youth sports landscape are all over the place. If the towns are even going to have something, what's crazy and what's affecting things most is adults not wanting to coach, adults not wanting to be around a lot of other kids. So it's not necessarily participation on our end. It's more so coaches wanting to be available. But what I will say is, and this is where I think being a Parisi and being affiliated with the Parisi has really helped us, just like the athletes that are the 1%ers, the athletes that want to play varsity, the athletes that aspire to play in college, they're going to do what they want to do regardless of external circumstances, right? Like athletes lie on a regular basis to their coaches, to their athletic trainers to cover up ankle sprains and twisted knees and everything like that because they want to play. So, and also maybe because they're young and they don't have full context of the world, another conversation for another time, but those 1% athletes are going to want to play, and they're going to be the ones that come back into training and they're going to do their thing regardless of what else is going on in the world. But I think what really is the differentiator is how serious organizations, whether it's the rec sports, the club sports, the Parisis, the other gyms in the area, how serious they take safety precautions, they take physical distancing, they take the actual setup for the athlete. Those facilities I think are going to be fine, especially in the long run. One thing that I really took pride in for ourselves and our facility was at the end of our first full month of business in July, we had 84 athletes in our program. When we closed in March, we had 119 athletes in our program. So yes, there's a dip, like we're looking like somewhere in the high 30s, but in our first full month of business, we had 84 kids. Now what was different was where those kids were training, whether it's 1-on-1, 2-on-1 versus larger group stuff. And by larger group stuff, I mean classes of 8-ish, 6 to 8-ish. Again, we're on a giant turf field, so we can space people out appropriately. But people were just doing different services than what they had originally done, which is fine. We're happy to see kids in the gym and train them in person as much as we can. But I really think that the new norm is going to be people probably paying attention to health standards a little bit more than they did before. And the bum gyms with bum owners and bum coaches just kind of getting fizzled out because they don't care. And I think that if you show your clients you care and you go through some, hoops and ladders and things that the state will put you through. But if you show that you care based off of your facility layout, the programming, how athletes check in and out of your building, then that reputation, I think you'll be fine. I think you're seeing it now with restaurants, like people will be like, oh, you went out to eat. How was it? It's not even how was the food. It was how was the setup? How was the service? How is this and that? Has nothing to do with the actual quality of what you're spending money to go get. Right. So I feel like the gym situations are going to be very similar. People are going to be like, oh, you went inside and worked out. How was it? And that's kind of what it's going to be like for us. No one's going to care. I think people will care less about what we do. They'll care more about how we do it. And that's going to become the new norm.
I think that's exactly it. And that's kind of what I wanted to lead into. Now we got the fun COVID stuff out of the way. I feel good. I think things are moving in the right direction. I've seen it in our state. We've been definitely tighter than most. But I think if you operate with these parameters, and the good thing I've seen with kids is they understand it. They get the masks, they get the whole sanitizing and all that type of stuff. So I think everyone gets it now, and we hopefully can get back to training normally. But how have you found it? I can kind of tell you how I found it. How have you found now kids coming back? Obviously, we have our own programming that we prescribe, through Parisi's and through Train Heroic, which is a great partner of ours. We have our normal programs, but what I've had to do, not only with my own kids and also the kids at the school, is I've had to change my programming a little bit. I've had to kind of go backwards in a good way. I think some people think backwards is bad, but I've gone backwards to more body weight based movements, speaking more about movement patterns and kind of reestablishing that, because a lot of kids, were off. They weren't really doing a lot. And it's almost like, okay, in a good way, we could take a step back to take a couple steps forward. So what have you done with your athletes as they've made that return, and how has the progression worked for you guys in the gym?
Yeah. And I know we talked about this on your Vertimax pod, Steve, where like work capacity out, like there was nothing. They didn't have anything. Absolute strength and just our kids' strength overall was okay. It was okay. That's come back.
Same thing. Yep.
But one thing that, and this is something that I'm not surprised to say it now, but at the time I really was kind of shocked, was how, what's a good way to say it? Like kids didn't, I don't want to say they didn't listen as well, but they didn't have context. So what we basically lost with our athletes, like if we're getting a kid to go from a goblet squat to a split squat, and we're using a kid's like acceleration technique in a split stance or shin angle to kind of coach them into a good split position, they don't have that anymore. Like that was gone. Like all the context that we work so hard to relay to our athletes to get them into a good position in the weight room or vice versa, gone, because they didn't have that same exposure. Like you're saying, kids were kind of out of it. They weren't really doing much. Well, that's to be expected on a physical level, but cognitively it was gone. Like everything that we had tried to do was gone. And we had to actually find that with our programming, we definitely had to regress kids mightily, but at the same time, we had to really think about what we were saying and how we were coaching these kids, because they came back in after playing Fortnite, FIFA, NBA, NHL for hours on end because
Netflix binges.
Yeah, because I mean, even then, like if a kid got done school first week of June, even then they had 3-4 weeks off. Or we have kids coming in that we didn't even see all summer because their travel sports backed them up. And when they weren't playing travel sports, they were just playing video games or they were doing other things that was just not what we do in the gym. So that was probably the biggest thing that I noticed that was a surprise, was just how hard we had to coach kids to get them into effective positions, to get them to be effective in the weight room or on the track or whatever it might be that we were doing.
Yeah. I mean, I saw a ton of that. It's like they just forgot how to move. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. You say, hey, we need your shin, we need drive your shin forward, and the kid stands up and they're like, what do you mean? Or they'll like stand up and like reposition their feet. I'm like, oh man, like it's gone. Like it's all the context we worked to build is just gone.
Yeah. And I think, what is starting to happen is now the kids that I've worked with, I've had some of them for about 2 months, they're starting to come back. It is starting to click finally. You know what I mean? Like you said, mentally and physically. And one of the concepts that, we talk about a little bit during our training week and our education, and, maybe it's something we need to dive in a little deeper. I wanted to get your thoughts on it, where, the thoughts on, when we work with athletes, we're definitely working on technique. That's one of our staples. That's something we work on. But obviously we work in a weight room. We get a little of that work in. But one of the things too is more that thought of, and the word I like to use is locomotion, more of those higher frequency movements and maintaining those movements. I know we work on deceleration and holding positions, and I think that's important. But what I'm starting to find is I'm seeing more people spend a lot of time in that area and maybe not as much as the locomotion area, meaning just make the kids move. And one of my staples I say is just go run. I mean, the kids need to sprint. If they don't sprint, they're not going to get faster. You can be technical till you're blue in the face. Sprinting is a strengthening movement. So, what are your thoughts? I know I poisoned a well when I said that, but what are your thoughts on more locomotion? And when I say versus, it's against it, but on the other side of it, more biomechanics and technical based workouts, especially for the kids coming back in the context that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think locomotion along with core, and by core, I mean like anti-extension, anti-flexion movements, anti-lateral movements are probably the two most forgotten movement patterns that anyone trains. We say, what's a movement pattern? And actually it's so funny you say this, because I just had this conversation with our intern who started last week. We were covering just movement patterns, and she rattled off squat, deadlift, hinge, upper push, upper pull, and then I was like, well, what else? And she was like, well, I guess it's important to have a strong core, and that's a conversation for a different time. But then I said, well, what about this? And I wrote locomotion on the board because it's a movement pattern. Like when you work with athletes, and even when you work with non-athletes, The ability to move in space in multiple directions, whether it's under load or under velocity, or I mean, even just if it's like, I don't say it's not static, but under varying speeds, it's a movement pattern, right? Like we do it, like you say like the classic Steve Leo is just run. Like you need to run. Like at some point your kid just needs to run because one, specificity, two, that's the only way they're going to get better at anything is practicing that. So yeah, in the weight room, like we do everything it's frontal plane. Everything is frontal plane. And just to even get added locomotion in the weight room, it's extremely difficult, especially if you have a small weight room. But two, it's a movement pattern in itself. And it was really first brought up in your place with the foundational capacity screen through the guys at FMS. Like that's a screen that they do as a farmer carry for distance, for time, with a percentage of an athlete's weight to see if they can even do it. And watching grown adults do this test was unreal because it's so hard. It's so hard, but it was an actual screen. And that was probably the first time I'd seen anyone actually pay attention to locomotion, let alone figure out some way to assess it. But yeah, I agree. I think it's just one of the most overlooked movement patterns for an individual, let alone an athlete.
Yeah, and if you look at, the athletes that I've been working with, so I've had my kids over the summer, they're transitioning into sports now, they're kind of fading out, but now I'm back into school, and actually Monday was my first day with athletes because of New Jersey, they shut down fall sports until the 14th. And, we had the first day of kids, and all the kids thought we were going to pop in the weight room and use barbells, and I said, nope, get out to the turf. And we did a body weight circuit, and I'm telling you, it was maybe 12 minutes. It was squats, squat jumps, lunges, and push-ups, 15 seconds each. After each round of that, we took about a 2-minute break. We did 3 full rounds, and it was like these kids ran a marathon. I mean, they were toasted. They were done. And they were like, well, you're just trying to kill us. I said, no, I'm just trying to assess
15 seconds on, 2 minutes off is the opposite of trying to kill you.
Yeah. So it told me a lot. It was a test for me. And one was looking at work capacity, like we always talk about, but it's just getting it to move. And one of the things I was trying to get them to do, I'm like, when you squat, I want a squat per second. When you do a squat jump, I want a squat jump per second to get moving at that faster rate. What's nice is there's no load, right? So if we work more in body weight in the beginning with these kids, they're working under no load, it's just their body weight. So, I mean, the odds of them getting hurt pretty low. As long as you coach them the right way, should be fine. Mm-hmm. And then getting to move faster, because what I'm seeing a big trend now, and this is just me on my soapbox, of people being so much breaking down of movement, which is important. I'm not saying it's not important, but sooner or later they have to move, right? And if you're just having them do like a squat jump or doing squats or push-ups, as long as the patterns are pretty good, they're going to fly through it very fast. They have to move quicker. They have to get their joints aligned. I don't think it's that hard to do with most kids, but they have to learn to push harder, push through the ground harder, which is something we're working on with sprinting. And the technique, that's always going to be something we work on. And like you said, if you go back to our warm-up, because I did do a full warm-up with them too, which I think they didn't realize that warm-up was going to get them a little bit. That's locomotion. So what's nice about the way we've always trained, it does support that. But one of the things I've told the kids is we're not really going to hit the weight room much in the beginning. We're just going to build you through this locomotion pattern and really start talking about, building those muscles up, getting you to sprint, because sprinting is a strength exercise. Anybody can argue that with me if they want, and maybe not spend as much time in a weight room in the beginning and then start to kind of layer that in. So I don't know if that's something, when you started out with your athletes back in, mid-June, how have you looked at that, and have you progressed in that manner, or have you, hit the weights right away? What was your thought on it?
Steve, do you mean like velocity and movement?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to say velocity-based training, like VBT, okay. But
I didn't know. I mean, I just think of like locomotion as like a carrier, like actually like moving weight through space, which I guess they are, but you reference like speed. So I just want to make sure we're talking on the same page before I say something. But when kids came back, they were handed a 10-pound bumper plate. Like that's what they're thinking. And we did everything from like body weight squats, assisted holds. And yeah, we definitely did like some positional isometrics and things like that, because I mean, you're in Jersey where athletes are competitive. I mean, Northern Vermont athletics, people get pissed. Like parents will get mad at me when I'm like, well, I mean, Vermont athletics as a whole are relatively weak. They're like, oh, well, our team went to New York and won this tournament. I'm like, yeah, well, your kid went to upstate New York, which is as weak as Vermont, So Vermont athletics, like if you find a hardcore athlete, like they're probably going to prep school. But our kids, like we had to do some positional work because there's like like you're saying, like the idea of getting to some type of like speed behind movement, it's so foreign for them. I'll say that it's so foreign for them that, we just basically, every kid had like a light dumbbell, a 10-pound plate. And we did a lot of TRX work because let alone move fast, like kids they just struggle to move. And even now, like even our best athletes, you ask them to do something with intent, ask them to do something fast. Like I would love to see our 5-hop broad jump. I do this now in our Parisi evaluation. When a kid does their 5-hop broad jump, I'll have them do 5 jumping like a frog, like as fast as you can. And then I'll have them do another round. I'll have 5 hops where I'll let them reset in between. And I want to see the difference in like the gap between, the different speeds of movement. Cause you want to talk about exposing an athlete, have them do 5 broad jumps for speed and see what that looks like, how well they can control themselves, how well they can get in and out of each movement. And it's a worthy note. Like you're talking about, like watching an athlete move with locomotion, having an athlete move with velocity. Like, I mean, it gets ugly quick for most.
Listen, I've had it happen many times with some of the bigger guys that I've worked with, whether it be linemen or I've been working with a lot of throwers now in track. And, they're good squatters, they can clean a lot of weight, but you tell them to do some type of bounding or hopping drill, it's like cement hitting the ground.
Yeah, and you can do anything heavy and slow. Yeah. That's easy. Yeah.
And that's the thing. Listen, you and I, we talk about this all the time, but I think it's always important to kind of bring it up. It's just taking that transfer from the weight room, out to the track. And one of the terms I've been kind of just messing around with is, kids that are weight room warriors versus athletes. Mm-hmm. And I think that's happening a lot now. You have the kid who goes in the weight room and kills it. And I respect it a ton. I think it's awesome. But then the kid's got to get on the field and play. That lacrosse player has got to ride and clear and do his thing and make plays. And he doesn't have to be the biggest, strongest, fastest kid out there. They just have to be athletic. Speed will definitely play a role. But I think, it's hard to kind of get people to understand because, listen, weights are manageable, right? You know what the numbers are. When you can measure them, you can manage them. So you know kind of where they're at. Athleticism, it's not fully defined. It's kind of in the eye of the beholder. So I think that's something that we do as coaches. Have you seen that? Have you experienced that and talked with parents? Because, listen, parents and kids sometimes have different views and look through different lenses when it comes to what really athleticism is. Yeah,
I think there's 3 things on that. The first is what a parent expects when they come into the program. Like they expect their kid to leave a dripping ball of sweat every time they come in. And I'd say probably the number one negative feedback piece we get from parents is that their kid isn't tired enough when they leave the gym. And that's where we have the conversation of just what we do. And to train to get fast on a 30-yard track, you don't necessarily need to be a hot, sweaty mess, or when you're training for absolute speed. That's one thing. And if your kid is that hot and sweaty after a workout, they're probably not in shape, which is probably why they're hot, messy, sweaty messes at the end. And then 2, and this actually, like you're talking about with like the barbells and like actually being able to put load on an implement and lift it more and seeing progression. We had this conversation today in the Parisi mentorship coaching call, is an area that one of the coaches wanted to get better at. And there's this idea of regression and progression and speed. And I think this is probably a good time to bring it up because you would know as well as anyone. Like we can talk about a kid progressing by putting more weight on the bar. We can talk about a kid progressing by getting into a challenging position. But when a kid goes from skipping in the warm up to a full on sprint and you watch that sprint and you go, oh my God, ooh, make kind of a face like, oh, that's not what I really thought I was going to see from the skip. Coaches don't really know how to get in the middle, right? How to kind of get a kid from a decent skip to a better run, like a better ability to run. And I think that's just because no one talks about it. Like you just said, Steve, like people can understand the weight room because the weight room is probably pretty comfortable. It's linear progression for most. We can have the argument of like conjugate and things like that, but it's pretty black and white. Like that's the weight room, especially with a kid. Like it's foundation movement patterns, put a little bit more weight on the bar. That's kind of the old Chad Coy saying. A little bit more weight on the bar each week, you're probably going to get a little stronger. And the other thing too is,
it definitely works.
Yeah, kids, when they get like in the weight room, they get sore the next day, most of them. And they're like, ooh, I did something great. But with speed training, they're like, am I getting faster? I don't really know. Unless you're a track kid and you're getting measured a lot. But no one talks about speed training to that capacity. Like that's it. To people, speed work is a bag session with a coach and a stopwatch in a fields running gassers. And they think that's speed work, or it's agility ladders and that's speed work. Or it's the new one now is like pushing things up a hill and dragging tires through a parking lot. And they're like, that's speed work. I'm like, that's just making you tired, man. Like, that's not actual speed work. So I think those are the big pieces there. And I know I said 3, but I'm talking so much I forgot the third. But it's people not really knowing what it is, like what speed work really is. And then the other piece is like we're saying, like people just have different expectations of like what they're gonna get and what they're gonna feel as they do it.
I mean, listen, if you look at what we do, I mean, I've been involved with Parisi now over 20 years. You've been in it for over 10. And I've always taken big pride, and that's what we do. I mean, we teach speed better than anyone I've ever seen. I've been all around the country now and talk to coaches from around the world, and we do it as good or better than anyone else that I've seen in the youth market. Now, there's some people who do a great job with Olympic athletes. Hey, that's not what we work with. We're working with developmental athlete, which there's some challenges there, right? It's hard working with a 13, 14-year-old. I love the challenge. I enjoy it. And it's funny you said that, some people, when they look at the speed stuff, they kind of don't really understand or get it. But here's the funny thing. That's what they want. When you watch a football game on Sunday, what are they talking about the whole time? How fast everybody is.
That's the biggest highlight was right? What's his name? Matt Breida this week watching, I think he plays for the Dolphins now. So maybe it was like the Dolphins Pats game. Shout out. I'm not a Patriots fan, but shout out the Cowboys. Still looking like the Cowboys from last year. Yeah. We'll end with that. We had
a bad call the other night too. It's a bad call.
We'll end with that one. But that's like the whole first highlight they showed was Matt Breida was the fastest dude carrying the ball last year. He ran like 21 miles an hour holding a football in full pads, which is unreal. That's unreal.
And trust me, kids know that between watching sports on TV, which is kind of different. Kids don't watch it as much, but they play video games. And what's one of the biggest things in a video game for a player? Speed.
Speed, man. The little shoes next to their name.
Yeah, that's important. So it's just a matter of how do we convey that to the kids, because when it comes to speed, they may not feel it right away. Like you said, on a barbell, hey, if I put up 100 pounds, I put up 90 last week. Well, I felt different. I felt strong. They could sprint. We could actually see they're faster or even show them they're faster, but they may not feel it. So it's trying to find ways, in my mind, how do you get them to buy in? And one of the terms I've been using with my kids at school is I call it the motivation factor, right? I'm going to find something to motivate you. It could be a watch. It could be somebody chasing you. It could be you having to make a play in a game. And I think that's something that I want to dive in deeper with our coaches and our network. I know, listen, Eric Mitchell's the man when it comes to motivating and getting people fired up. But I think we also need to find ways right in the middle of a session. What keywords can you say to motivate that kid? So like you said, I love your term that you use is move with intent. Because it's the old way, right? Two kids will line up. You have one kid run. He might run one time. One kid run another time. You make them race each other. The time's probably going to be better, right?
That could be way better.
It'll never change, right? But how do we make those little micro changes in the middle of a session to get that kid to fully understand, okay, I need you to empty the tank every single time, unless we're working on a drill or something. But you got to go. You got to let it rip. And
you know what I kind of think it is? You didn't ask this, but this has kind of always been my hunch that kids don't train hard because they're afraid of what their coaches have done to them in the past as far as just gassers. Like they're just afraid to run hard because they feel like they always need to have a little bit in the tank because at any moment, like their coach has probably done in practice, they flip a switch and then all of a sudden they got to run like 10 110s or they've got to run up this hill or do whatever. And it's like they just always want to just leave a little bit in the tank. It's always been my hunch whenever working with kids.
Well, I will tell you as a track coach now, that is totally true. Because I have track kids that have said that to me, like, Coach, well, you told us we're running 6 200s. I had to conserve a little. Like, I mean, it definitely happens. The other thing that you just made me think of is, and I don't know if you agree, is some kids are worried about making a mistake, right? Some kids have been at practice, made a mistake, and then they got to go run. And it's, again, we're punishing with the things we want them to love. So it's just trying to find that right balance of, all right, we want to motivate you, but we want to motivate you because it's better for you. It's not better for me as the coach. And I think the context of how you say that is very important. I know you're a big fan of Nick Winkleman, and I am as well, on coaching cues and how to communicate. And I think that's something that, we have to continually try to evolve with our kids, especially in this time. I mean, kids they're a little bit different right now. They've gone through a little bit of trauma, mental trauma, I feel. I think they're starting to come out of it, but some kids are a little beat up from missing their spring season, maybe missing their summer club, whatever it might be. And some kids, like I'll give you an example, my daughter, right? She didn't run track, missed both her track seasons for club and for school. Couldn't do anything over summer because every track meet was canceled. was going to play volleyball in the fall. That got canceled because it's an indoor sport. So now we're waiting for a winter track to happen. That may not happen. She could go a whole year with never competing.
Yeah.
So it's how do you find it? And she's not the only one. There's definitely more kids out there. So I think our program can hopefully be a little bit of a stopgap and keep them motivated, because we have to keep those competitive juices flowing, because kids need to compete. They need to compete, and they compete because they want to have fun. I know it's kind of crazy. Some people look at competition as a negative thing. I think it's a positive if it's done in the right context. So, I mean, what do you do in your sessions to get kids to compete each other? Aside from the typical races and stuff, what are some of the things that you've done?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, races are probably number one. When you got a Brower and you spend the money on a Brower timing system, you use it as often as you can. The big piece, and to be honest, like right now, Steve, we're not doing a whole lot because we can't do any equipment sharing. Like, there's no like med ball relays.
Yep,
there's no,
problem,
so it's super challenging on our end. But I think what we've kind of put more of an onus, and I won't say like on the kids, but I think right now kids definitely understand that they have the ability to train, and they're kind of pissed. So we've been using, I don't mean to sound like it's like not a negative thing, but kids come in, they're pissed because like this week it was, hey, I'm on varsity and rosters are 25 on my soccer team. Every other year I've played, it's been 20. So I got 5 extra kids, and I'm like, yeah, you look pissed. And they're like, yeah, I am. I'm like, all right, let's go work out. So we kind of almost have to push their buttons a little bit. So I wish I could say I had like these sweet, like competitive juices. Right now in Vermont, we aren't allowed to do that. So kind of all we can do is talk to our kids and say, hey, what's going on? How you feeling? Yeah. You're upset. You had to go to school. Yeah. Let's go work out. Let's get a little pissed off and let's go work out. And then we give them a medicine ball. We have them just chuck that thing as hard as they can. So, we're kind of using those, I'll say, like the kids finding their actual feelings. They're typically anger and getting after it, but we're having the conversations with them. And that's really what we've leaned on a lot of, because these kids, there's not a lot of good going on. Like you're saying, Steve, like there's not a lot of good in these kids' lives. Like that, it's tough. It's tough. So we're pissing them off and we're training hard.
Listen, they need that release. I mean, I've seen it with, obviously I bring up my daughter, but also some of her friends I've been training over the summer, and definitely a big difference from, I'd say, early July is when we kind of got back into it. We were outside training. Like we just had a training session last night, my daughter and 2 of her friends, both of them very good softball players. And all of a sudden I was screaming and yelling. They were like, what's going on? I'm like, I finally see it. You guys are finally coming back. Like, you look different now. You're getting competitive. You're working hard. The techniques, they looked fast. Like, you know what I mean? They were just popping off the ground. We're on a grass field and they were popping. And I said, guys, it took you, a good 2.5 months to kind of get back to normal. And, they didn't really understand it. I was ecstatic and I saw it in their faces. They were smiling more during the session. They're joking around while they're getting a drink of water. And, we have to create that environment because, I'm in a school environment and I'm seeing it. It's very stringent because it has to be. Masks on. They can't really socialize. And this might be the only time they get to socialize and just have that, that sports interaction, the old school locker room, although they're not in a locker room, right? They're just together having a little bit of fun. And I think I forgot how important that was. We forgot as adults, but I really forgot how important it is for the kids that are currently playing. I don't know if you've seen that as well.
Yeah, man. Locker talk is the best. Like I was never a good athlete. There was nothing spectacular about me. I played lacrosse and I was not very good, but you do it for the guys, you do it for the team, and that's kind of the forgotten thing with sports and youth sports getting so damn competitive, and that's a good thing. But at the same time, so is social interaction. I have a almost 2-year-old, and when preschool was closed, one of the things that I was worried about was just her social interaction with other kids. There's no sports, and I'm just looking at my kid being like, man, I really wish my kid could be around other kids right now, because this can't be good it's not good for me. And I'm a grown adult, super extroverted. It's not good for me. It's probably not good for this little human to just not be exposed to other little humans. And I think we forget that when I say but when kids get to be in the adolescent age, or even in early adolescence, in 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, that just being around other kids is good for them, regardless of the sport. The sport is a vehicle for social interaction. Yeah, at some point it switches and kids are super competitive and it becomes about competition and playing better competition and improving in your sport. And that's totally fine too. But at the same time, that 18-year-old elite travel soccer player is going to benefit from being around other kids. And I think we just need to remember the social aspects of sports, and that's what makes it great. Look at the NBA, with all these dudes like by themselves in the bubble, and they're just having a time cheering for each other. Like they're grown adults, and like the camaraderie of team. I think we forget that sometimes is really important.
Yeah, it definitely opened my eyes. I mean, it's one of those things I always knew about, but now I'm seeing it more. And then, in our sessions, some kids didn't have their team. So their sessions with me, and we were out on a field, we were outside, that was their team. You know what I mean? Whatever kids that were paired up with that day. And what I've always loved, and I'm seeing it even more now, I'm seeing kids become friends, even though they're different teams, different schools, whatever, in our sessions. And I think that's just a great thing to see for our kids. And that's another just crazy benefit that we never thought about. Again, we know we're going to get kids faster, we're going to get them stronger and build self-confidence, but just, I think creating relationships with other kids too is important. They were isolated for so long, especially in New Jersey. I mean, our kids were truly on lockdown for a couple months. So I really feel good about that. But, to kind of get back to the nitty gritty when it comes to training, what do you think of some of the new trends that are out there? Is there anything that you've seen? Not with what we do. I think we're pretty much on a cutting edge in a good way where we always implement it into the program the right way. But have you seen any new trends out there, whether it be technology or some newer training methodologies that you see that you think we might need to investigate more of? Obviously, Bill was with faster training. We're definitely incorporating that. That's probably our newest project. But what have you seen, and what do you think might be some of the trends moving forward?
Yeah. I mean, for myself personally, I'm all in on sleep. I'm all in on sleep tracking. I'm all in on seeing when someone is sleeping. And I give a huge shout out to Fitbit for making it super accessible. And now even the Apple Watch Series 6 is releasing with better sleep tracking, with like blood oxygen levels being built into the watch as well. Like these things that you see with Whoop Band and Oura Ring. And I mean, our kids aren't wearing Oura Rings or Whoops, but they will be wearing Apple Watches, and they do wear Fitbits already. And that's one thing that I always ask, especially kids that I'll say that the kids that come into our facility with the intent of becoming a better athlete, playing at more competition or higher levels of competition, I'm talking to them about recovery. Like, yes, the technical side of training and velocity-based stuff that is coming out with like Push Band is a really good product. But I'm honestly, Steve, like I'm not really up with like all the other technology because we don't really have the budget to afford it in our gym. I think
a lot of gyms.
But I'm all in on sleep and recovery, nutrition as well. Like I said, we have a fleet of registered dietitians, as I like to refer to them. Because for me, in the age group that we train, they don't train hard enough or long enough, or they haven't trained hard or long enough to require fancy technology. There's a couple sport specific places near us, like a high-end baseball place that uses Rapsodo and they're calculating spin rate and things like, and I really think that technology in sport specific manners is huge, like that's the outcome, right? Like if you're a hockey player, you want to know how hard you shoot, like that's the outcome. In the weight room, I'd love to know how fast you move a barbell or a med ball, but to be honest, specificity is king. And I'd rather see you put that intent or max effort when you're doing your private lessons 5 days a week, because that's the kind of kid you are. So for me, if I can really drive home recovery, if I can really drive home sleep, if I can drive home nutrition and getting kids to think about that as it relates to their ability in the weight room, I'm doing two things. One, I'm making them actually a better person. Two, when they go and talk to their parents about it, that's the kind of stuff that parents cannot break through with their kids at all, ever. So I know I'm leaving more of an impact just professionally as well for myself, as being the guy that's talking to the kid about his sleep score on Fitbit, because that's no one else is doing that. The baseball coach isn't doing it, and it's going to impact their ability in the classroom. It's going to impact their ability in their mood with their family. So I've really doubled down on sleep, especially after being home for 15 weeks and being able to sleep really well and not having to wake up at 5 a.m. every day. It's become more important, and it's I think still the greatest unknown in sports is sleep and sleep trends. And I know that the NBA is putting a lot of stock into each team having their own sleep doctor that tracks travel trends and all this information. So you got to figure if pro sports is investing millions of dollars into it, then anything we can do on the youth level is only going to set them up for success along the way.
I agree. It's funny, I never thought sleep was going to be something that we paid so much attention to, but I've definitely been reading much more about it. There was a great speaker at Perform Better a few years ago. I honestly forget his name, but he did a great job really discussing, the effects of sleep. And we all know rest is important, but, our kids are so busy when it comes to playing a lot of sports and going to school and having academics and SATs and ACTs and all that type of stuff. And, I see that at the private school that I'm at, these kids, they work their tails off. And it's funny, a few of the kids that I worked with, like I had a track kid that I'm working with now. He's trying to run in college. So we did some work over the summer. And I said to him, I'm like, man, you're running really well. He's like, yeah, I feel good. He's like, why do you think that is? I'm like, because you're sleeping more. You're not going to school. You're not taking AP calculus and all that. And that stuff's important, but you're going to school. And then last week, we worked out a few days and he was a little ragged, you know what I mean? And he goes, Coach, he goes, I understand that. He goes, I'm getting up at 6 a.m. I'm at school all day. I'm doing homework at night and these practices as well. He goes, I see what you're saying. I see how important it is that I need to sleep. His body just felt different for the workouts, and recovery is important, but also being recovered and ready for the next workout is hard as well. And that's what I've seen a lot with my kids.
Yeah, we have the conversation with our kids when they hit the weight room. We go, okay, what are we doing to your body? What are we trying to do? And they're like, oh, we're trying to do this. And I'm like, yeah, we're trying to make changes. And are these changes physical? Or what are they? And they're like, oh yeah, it's a physical change. Like I want my arms to grow. I want my body to put more force in the ground. Like they come up with some superficial things, but okay, if you want your arms to grow, you need to figure like what physical things can you do to help your body recover? Well, eating, putting nutrients into your body is a physical thing you can do. Sleeping affects your physical state. Like even if you just isolate it out into just physical, mental, like, yeah, you can read about shooting a basketball better. You can sit down, watch all the Instagram, YouTube videos, whatever on how to shoot a basketball better. But at some point, the physical nature you provide to your body, physical nurturing you provide to your body is going to pay dividends. And all you need to know is the one time you come in to work out after spending all night with your boys and you come in and you're just hot garbage in the weight room, hot garbage in practice, you kind of understand, oh yeah, I didn't sleep last night. So it's an eye opener as to how important it can be if you want to be at a high level, because you string a couple of those days together and everything's gone. Like that's it. You've set yourself backwards and not forward. So, I've taken more onus on myself with kids when they come in to train to have those questions, and Train Heroic does a really good job of having like the readiness scores and the readiness wellness surveys before a training session. And I look at those, as much as I think any other coach probably does, because that's the conversation piece. Like these are kids self-reporting on their own, huge. And two, these are things that they're going to have to pay attention to even when they're not in the weight room with you, that are going to have the biggest impact when they are or aren't in the weight room with you going forward. So it's just so important. And I think that a really good book that I read, it's kind of dense, but it's called Why We Sleep. I forget who it's by, Michael someone, but the book title is called Why We Sleep. It's very eye-opening. The chapter on caffeine will scare any strength coach listening to this or any personal trainer listening to this, because it scared the crap out of me. But it's a really good book that talks just about different factors in our life. Like it's one of a few books that actually kind of dives into just the different lifestyle factors, rather than saying like this much sleep correlates to this. It'll say, like studies of caffeine intake or studies on supplemental melatonin or all these other different factors that affect sleep and lifestyle. They actually report on that in the book on a couple macro studies that have been done over the course of 15, 25 years. So super credible. It's backed by science, and definitely a good read for anyone who's in strength conditioning or the health and fitness industry at all, because if you want to get results from your clients, you need to understand the lifestyle factors that are going to affect those results or impair those results for your clients.
That's awesome stuff, man. I mean, I think we probably can have another call just about sleep stuff, but I know we're starting to wind down on time a little. I know we have some people on this call. So does anyone want to ask any questions of myself or Casey or any comments, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. Do that, or tired and they want to eat dinner. They got done training all day.
I mean, I don't blame them.
I know we've all been there. All right. Well, I'll try to wrap it up. So as always, Casey, you and I have been on a couple of pods together, and it's always a pleasure. You and I could probably talk 5-6 hours on training. And
I told you, we can go Joe Rogan style, man. I'll do another hour. If you want to go Joe Rogan, we can go full Joe Rogan.
I think we might have to have an overtime show at some point. Carol's gonna kill us, but you know what, you got me thinking already. It was great. With the sleep stuff. So I'm definitely going to check out some of the things that you talked about. Maybe we could post them later, but I think hopefully everyone that was on this call or downloads this podcast, our goal is to make you think, and you made me think already, which is great. And I really hope that everyone gets a little stimulated with this. We're going to be running this once or twice a month. And, we want to try to give you guys more content, more accessible on your phones or tablets or whatever, so you guys can download it. And we'll continue to get great people on like Casey. He is one of the leaders in our industry and one of the go-to people. When I think about talking about training, he's one of the top guys I want to talk to. So I can't thank you enough. We're always fighting a good fight, and hopefully our Cowboys can turn around this week against the Falcons.
Unreal. The only saving grace for the Cowboys was watching Jason Garrett and the Giants just hot garbage on Monday night. But yeah, it's such a tortured Cowboys fan. It's whack.
Sooner or later, it'll be okay. But
of course, I got to watch the Patriots games announced by Tony Romo too. It's awful.
That's true. Any parting thoughts besides our poor Cowboys?
No, man, Steve, it's always a pleasure talking with you. And if anyone has any information or wants more information on me or the work that I do, coachcaseylee.com is the place to go. Or edgevt.com/Parisi. That's the home base for the Parisi work. But yeah, that's the gist of what I've got going on. And I'm on social media at Coach Casey Lee for everything. So feel free to come in, chat. I love talking shop. I've got my own podcast called The Three Things. You can check that out everywhere as well. It's, I'll say a little bit more unfiltered than this podcast was, so it can get pretty rowdy. Steve's been a guest a couple times as well, and his episodes are always some of my most downloaded. So, you guys are in good hands with Steve Leo as the host of this pod going forward.
Thank you, man. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate all you guys getting on. You definitely lead us in your own way, because, you're taking the time out 8-9 o'clock on a Wednesday night to do this. So I wish you guys all the best, and hopefully everyone is healthy, and let's keep pushing forward, guys. All right. Thanks.
Take it easy, guys.